Hi everybody, good evening, welcome. This is FIDE Master Dennis Monokroussos, and today we have what we might consider kind of an appendix to the Superfast Najdorf Part 5 shows. You'll see what I mean in a moment. Now, this was a speed game, 5-minute chess game, played at the local club just yesterday, at least yesterday for me. Won't be yesterday for you, probably, when you see this. And so this had happened after like 4.5, 5 hours of chess. We had a quick play tournament, and then I had been playing with this expert friend of mine for a couple of hours, and that's who this was against. And so this was probably I think this was the last game we played in the series. So, you know, at this point in the day, it's just all a matter of kind of intuition and whatever sort of looks nice, okay, you play it, rather than any kind of deep calculation. Anyway, I thought here that I would put into practice all the stuff that I had been presenting to you guys and researching, and played bishop to d3 here. So I don't generally play this bishop g5 system. I used to play it all the time, but haven't in a serious game in quite a while. Nothing wrong with it, just hadn't really felt like catching up on all the theory. Now that I've caught up on it a little bit, you know, I thought it'd be fun. Especially, again, 5-minute chess at the local club. Who cares? You know, just play whatever. Anyway, I was hoping for b5, and, you know, this is obviously what we had been looking at in tremendous detail. But no, of course, my opponent, being the killjoy, played h6, the brown system. So, all right, I think I spent around a minute here trying to decide what exactly, or a minute over the next move or two, trying to decide what exactly I wanted to do. So I remembered, of course, bishop h4, g5, and this is something we looked at before. So this kind of business, and then let's say bishop g3 here. And this is a position that I presented at least 2 or 3 times in the earlier videos. I didn't say too much about it other than to say it's about equal. I mean, black's got the great knight on e5. He's going to castle long, so his king's not really endangered by the openness of the king side. And on the flip side, white has potential pressure on the f-file. The h-pawn is passed. I mean, it's not really a threat anytime soon, but it's there. It could become a factor someday. But anyway, this kind of position didn't really appeal to me very much. So, also, white can vary here. So this is something I don't think I mentioned in the earlier shows. It's not really very impressive, but it's just another possibility. And especially for those of you who don't like that knight perched on e5, you can just rip it off here. So f takes g4, and then black can either take with the pawn or with the rook, and then you can put a rook on f1, either one. They're both have their merits, and you know all these positions are around equal. I mean they're nothing spectacular for white, not bad, not spectacular, just playable. Anyway, I didn't want to play this. I didn't want to have anything to do with any of this bishop to h4 business. So another possibility, and I knew these 3 main moves, and I think I've probably mentioned all of them in past videos. So there's also queen h3, so taking advantage of the, or creating a pin along the h-file. Now here black can play, well okay, let me say one other thing. So it's not only of course pinning, I mean big deal, I mean that's not so amazing by itself. The real point, or real points, for one thing, if let's say black plays b5 and bishop to b7, then there's no pin on that long diagonal. And also, really the bigger idea is that there are a lot of knight takes e6 lines. And in fact, we're going to see knight takes e6 all over the place in the variations to come. So b5 is one possibility. Knight c5 looks like a pretty stable and typical idea. But knight to b6 is also relatively common. I mean, we're already in a bit of a sub-variation, but certainly not an unknown one. And knight to b6 is a move that has seen the light of day on quite a few occasions. I mean, there's at least 40 plus games just in PowerBook alone in this variation. So, oh, by the way, when I mentioned PowerBook, it's a chess-based database that's really a kind of a high-class database tree is the idea. So it's culled from the mega database, from their largest database, and generally higher rated players. So, you know, you're not going to find in the statistics that it presents, it kicks out games by fairly low rated players. So that's all that PowerBook is when I keep referring to it. So in other words, let's say about 41 games played at, let's say, an international master or higher level, or at least a FIDE master level. Okay, so knight to b6, f5, typical procedure here. We're trying to either pressure e6 and or force the pawn to come to e5, and then we'll try to take advantage of the d5 square. So for the knight on b6, and at least it's well placed from that point of view, it covers d5. Okay, so e5, knight b3. Knight f3 is also playable, and I think knight d to e2 has been played as well. But all right, knight to b3, let's say bishop d7, bishop e3, and now I think maybe knight to c4 is a little bit questionable, because now, see, the thing is, okay, white's bishop, I mean, it would love to just exchange itself off for both of these knights. Not so much, what I mean is, of course, not just from the standpoint that it would win a piece, but just conceptually speaking, that white would like to trade off all the pieces that defend d5, so at some point he can occupy it with a piece and maintain piece control over that square. Doesn't want to have a pawn there, wants to have pieces there. But white can only choose one. So the problem with knight c4 is that now white can get rid of all of the knights. So bishop c4, knight to d2, just to cover the e4 pawn. And now bishop goes back to g5, takes, queen d3, so covering c2. And now the knight's ready to leap into d5, and white's got an edge here. So all of this was by no means forced, but it's at least illustrative or illustrative of what white is trying to do in that variation, or one of the major ideas. However, I chose door number 3, the bloodthirsty and committal h4. So I wanted to play g4, take the knight, play g5, and throw everything at him. And one of the slight drawbacks to playing h6 is that it really weakens this f7, e6 complex. So if I can get this pawn going, g4, g5, g6, things kind of fall apart there. Also, as I alluded to earlier, there are lines where white plays, let's say e5, knight takes e6, bishop to g6 check. So again, taking advantage of this pawn's coming forward to h6. All right, well, let's see how this works out in the variations to come. So my opponent played b5. Okay, and now a little theoretical excursus here. All right, if knight takes e6 right away, this is dangerous, but with accurate moves, black is probably winning. So f takes e6, e5, okay, hitting f6, hitting a8. So standard recipe, bishop to b7, check, king f8, queen h3, preparing queen takes e6, but just h takes g5, and after queen e6, queen c4, black is up 2 pieces for 2 pawns. Of course, his knight is under attack, but still, when everything cashes out here, black is up a piece for pawn, and white's attack is a thing of the past. So this is just winning for black. Okay, so knight takes e6, too optimistic. All right, another idea is bishop takes f6. And then, okay, here I think g4 is good, and this is perhaps, maybe white has some reasonable chances for an edge here. e5 is quite entertaining too. So e5, standard double attack with the standard counter response. I wonder if e takes d6 could work. Probably not. Probably if e takes d6. Let me show you what I'm thinking of here for a moment. So if e takes d6, the idea is this. So bishop takes d6, and this probably doesn't work either. But let's see. Bishop takes b5, a takes b5, knight d to b5, bishop f4, king b1, bishop f3, knight c7, takes. Yeah, white's down a piece for a pawn. So, all right, this fancy business doesn't work. What I was going to say is even if that did work, black could just play bishop takes f3, and then bishop takes d1. And, okay, he's going to play rook c8, regain the pawn, and be a full exchange up. So none of this is any good for white. All right, so let me give that a question mark here in my notes. Okay, so that's e takes d6, no good. If queen h3, this is at least reasonable. Again, eyeing this knight takes e6, bishop g6, queen e6 idea. Black is probably better after knight to d5 a little bit, but it's quite unclear. Let's look at another variation along the same lines, queen e2. So if queen e2, of course supporting the pawn, and we're also making available some options with queen h5 check after some knight e6 ideas. Okay, so here's a disaster for black. Okay, you could play d takes e5, and then knight e6, and bishop checks, f takes e5, and if the knight moves, then rook h to f1, and bishop f7, and queen goes to d3 if black's king is on h7, and that's fatal. So black is probably forced to play queen c4, but then just e takes f6. White regains the piece with a vastly superior position. So back to queen to e2. Better is knight to d5. And now, okay, knight takes e6 is not really working any longer. White probably has nothing better than just to swap off some stuff. And this is about equal. So white might have some small chances for an edge, but black got rid of his bad bishop. The bishop he has remaining is a decent one. And white's chances really come down to whatever he can make out of his space advantage on the king side with the pawns there. Mostly in an endgame context, but it can come to bear. Anyway, objectively, this is probably pretty equalish. Okay, instead of queen to e2, or queen to h3, or e takes d6, another idea is queen to g3. So this 2 protects the pawn, and it hits the g7 pawn. The drawback is that the queen is now in a pin after knight e6, here, okay, f takes e5, king g8. So white would love to take back on f6, but his queen is hanging. So slight problem here. So that's why queen e2, or that's what queen e2 has over this variation. All right, so rook h to f1, b4, knight e2. Now the queen's protected, and again, if the knight moves, I mean this is catastrophic. If knight e4, bishop to f7 check, should be winning. Yeah, I think just easily. If king f8, bishop takes e6 check, and black either throws something in the way, or if he plays king e8, queen g6 is mate. And if he crawls out to h7, then queen g6 is mate. So black should try, instead of knight to e4, bishop to e4. And the problem with e takes f6 here is queen takes c2 mate. So white really has nothing better than to swap and then play queen to f3. And this regains the material, because we're not only threatening to take the knight, but if the knight runs away, there's queen takes on a8, and there's also quite a bit of harassment going on against black's king. So something like this is reasonable. Queen takes e5, queen f7, queen takes e7, with really a very unclear position. So black could try tricks like knight f2. Anyway, it's a fun position to analyze, but whether it's theoretically significant or not, I'm not sure. It might be, actually. Though I suspect that going back here after bishop takes f6, knight f6, maybe g4 is best. And also, okay, maybe bishop takes f6 can be played here too, although I'd have to make sure there's no e5, bishop takes b, or bishop takes b5 tricks. It might be there. So that probably at least deserves some consideration. I don't know if it's interesting or dubious or great or a blunder, but I would take a look at that. Okay, so anyway, instead of either knight takes e6, which is bad, or bishop takes f6, which is quite reasonable, I played g4. Okay, my opponent played bishop to b7, and now I took. And here I was ready, at least I took myself to be ready, for his captures, but he surprised me. So if bishop takes f6, I was intending to play bishop takes b5. Though, funny enough, it might be best to play knight c to e2. So on bishop takes b5, okay, if he plays bishop takes d4, then I just swap and I'm up a pawn and just winning. And this is no good for black at all. On a takes b5, I thought, okay, knight d takes b5, and I should be in good shape. But the thing is, I won't be able to play e5 as a follow-up after I play knight takes d6 check, obviously because of the bishop on b7. So this is actually a pretty murky position here, and it's not clear that white is better. Might be black who's a little bit better. So maybe knight c to e2 is more accurate. Anyway, I remind you this is a blitz game. Okay, if knight takes f6, then I'm great. g5, white's gold here, because after the knight retreats, then g6 is going to happen, and black is going to be miserable. But my opponent chose a third option and played g takes f6. And, okay, the idea is maybe to stop g5, but it turns out it doesn't. I played g5 anyway. Maybe not the best move. I think like the computer likes a3 to stop b4. And of course I saw b4 was coming, but I felt I didn't care. Perhaps rightly so. So I played g5. And my opponent played b4. So again, a computer suggestion here is queen to b6. Alright, it's a typical idea we mentioned before, trying to drive the knight from its active location. But again, it's human chess, it's 5-minute chess. And he played b4, which is a perfectly natural move. Okay, well, the question is, what should I do about my knight on c3? So this is a good place. Maybe there were some other places earlier that would have been also good to take a closer look at, but we'll at least stop here and try to figure out what white's move ought to do with this knight on c3. So take a moment, figure it out. I'm going to take a drink of water here while you're thinking. Okay, and at least the move I came up with, which in fact I think is the best move, and my silicon friend agrees with me, is g6. So as I mentioned before, once that pawn goes to h6, that whole f7 e6 construction becomes a lot more vulnerable. So some possibilities here. If he takes the knight, this is really bad. G takes f7. If the king goes to d8 or f8, knight e6 check wins the queen. And king takes f7 is even worse, because after queen h5 check, it's mate in two. Either, knight takes e6 and queen g6, or knight e6 and queen f7, in one order or another, is going to be mate in two. So that's terrible. If he tries to castle, on this I was just going to take on f7. And, okay, on b takes c3, play knight e6. And for instance, if queen to b6, b takes c3. And here I've got 3 pawns for the piece. Sure, my queen side is a little bit shot, but there's nothing really for him to do to compensate for it. And certainly he's no one to boast about the quality and integrity of his pawn structure either. And of course the rook on d8 is mine for the taking. The pawn on f7 is quite nice. His bishop on e7 is lousy. So this is perfectly good for white. Maybe an improvement, though, for black here is queen to a5. Right, not even bothering. I mean, he can't save the rook anyway, so just queen a5 looks better. Maybe white should play bishop to c4 here. Anyway, black is okay. And so maybe, again, the more accurate move here is knight to a4. But again, this is all killjoy computer stuff, so much more fun just to worry about what I was looking at. So my opponent played h5. And this is quite sensible. So he wants to stop these ideas where my queen goes to h5. And if you remember our discussion of the Richter-Rauser and of variations that end up with this kind of Richter-Rauser pawn structure, it's very common that black plays h5. When I refer to this Richter-Rauser pawn structure, I'm talking about this block of pawns here. Whoops. Let's get rid of that. This block here. And h5 is quite often played in that context. Okay, so h5 makes pretty good sense, and here I had to figure out what to do. And here I thought, I don't remember how long, I don't think it was actually that long, I just kind of sort of semi-spontaneously saw the idea and decided just for the love of chess, as I even said during the game, for the love of chess I have to do this. And you'll see what I came up with. Now, another move, actually you might want to again stop the recording and figure out what to do here, if you hadn't already thought of this position before g6. Okay, so objectively best, and I considered it, but I didn't see the follow-up, is g7. Okay, so rook g8, and here I thought, okay, I could play queen h5. That doesn't do anything. It's too slow. You can just take on g7 if nothing else. Or just take on c3, and I play queen h7 or h8. He just castles queenside, no problem. Or if I play rook h to g1, again, he takes the knight, and I'm too slow. But I didn't look at this long enough to see that I have knight takes e6. Takes, queen h5 check, we stop castling, and now queen to h8. And here white's winning. So that's a nice little tactic. So knight takes e6 is a very good move. after which white is just clearly winning. But you'll see the idea I had, and it was very nice. It's not sound. I didn't think it was sound during the game, but it was just so much fun that I had to do it. So I played g takes f7 check, king f7 is forced, rook h to g1. Okay, now, my idea is, of course, to play rook to g7 check. And he can't challenge me either, really, with rook h, not rook h, but rook a to g8, because then I just trade rooks. So I take, if he takes with the king, I play knight e6, and I'm happy. And if he plays rook takes, well, queen takes h5, and I'm happy. Because I'm not even down anything. I'm just up a pawn, and I have an attack, and e6 is falling. So he can't really stop that, so he plays b takes c3. Right, I play rook to g7 check, king e8, and now here, okay, this idea didn't even occur to me, but it would have been nice, especially because I could play it and then do what I did in the game anyway. So the objectively best move here, and again, it would have just been nice to throw this in just for the fun of it, is rook to g8 check. So he can't take, because if he does this, queen takes h5 check is pretty good, wins the queen, and maybe even better is knight takes e6. Because, okay, I'm threatening to win the queen, obviously, and if he saves it, it's just mate in 2. So that's pretty cool. So after rook to g8 check, black can play king f7, though. And here, the only good move for white is rook to g7 check, and then black has to play king e8 right back. So this would have just been a good repetition, and then I could go on to try my really fun idea, what I had in mind when I played g takes f7. And so that idea was, and is, e5. So this is a lot of fun. Of course, what I want to do is to create the mating pattern that I showed you here. So rook to g8, rook takes, knight e6, and queen h5. Right. So this kind of mating idea is what I'm up to with e5. So bishop takes f3, knight takes e6, and now I'm threatening bishop g6 mate. Okay, and of course I'm threatening knight takes c7. I mean, if all I was threatening was the mate, this would just be ridiculous, but knight takes c7 is grabbing the queen and can get the rook, or if he plays king f8, I have a perpetual of sorts with knight c7, e6. Okay, so here, what should black do? My opponent kind of went into a state of catatonic shock at this moment, and basically brought himself to the verge of losing on time. So he was ahead on the clock here, in part because I had spent time just figuring out what I wanted to do against the brown system with 10h6, and also because, of course, I had to take a little time to kind of see this idea. Though I didn't really work out too many details, it was more just kind of impressionistic. It just looked like a cool idea, and in a blitz game, why not? Just go for it. So here, as I said, he thought for about 2 minutes and really couldn't figure out what to do. Well, I think the best is probably just to play this. So c takes b2, throw this in, drive my king to a bad square, king b1, and now rook h6. And, okay, I mean, I can play knight c7. Obviously, I have to play knight c7. But at the end of the day, I'm probably losing. Well, I think objectively speaking, I am losing. But, I can still thrash around there and have some entertainment value. But objectively, rook h6 is good. Of course, not taking the rook. This would have been lots of fun. I mean, just in principle, it's great to be down a queen, rook, and a bishop, but give mate. And kind of ironically, actually, about that mate, I don't even need the rook, so I could have been down a queen, 2 rooks, and a bishop, if it were possible to throw in my rook somehow without messing up the mating pattern, and just to give mate with the knight and the bishop alone. Oh well, didn't happen. Anyway, my opponent played knight takes e5, so I guess he didn't see the rook h6 idea, and this is all right too, so he's clearing d7 for his king. Okay, so here I have to take the queen, and now he should play king to d7. So here's what would happen then. So I have to take the knight, because if I take the rook, he can do anything. He can play just bishop takes rook, or c takes b2 check first, sorry, and then bishop takes rook, and I'm dead. So f takes e5, cb, king b1. I don't want to play king b2, because then he can play rook to b8 check. So king b1, takes, and now rook takes a8 would be bad. I mean, maybe he's still okay, I don't know, but then e takes f6, and I'm doing better in the pawn contest than I would be in the other variations. So this would be good for me. So f takes e5 is definitely the best move here. So then check, here, take, king takes b2, and the smoke is cleared, white's down a pawn. Some drawing chances, to be sure, but you know, it's somewhere between clearly worse, at least practically speaking, between clearly worse and just ultimately losing. So, you know, I would still fight, and you know, it'd be a time scramble by this point. Anything could happen, but just objectively speaking, black is, of course, much better. But after knight c7 check, of course, this is a lot to kind of calculate through, and he just played king f8, but this makes my life easy. Knight e6 check, f takes e5, and here he lost on time. So black still has to be careful. So he can throw c takes b2 check, king to b1, and now what should black do here? So try to calculate a few moves from this position. It's still pretty complicated. Okay, so of course, you know, you can always stop the recording and try to figure it out. Variations we can reject right away are d takes c6 because bishop to g6 is mate, so it's kind of cute. Now the rook on d1 plays its part in maintaining the mating net. Or if he plays bishop takes d1, then we get still another version of it. So e takes f6, threatening rook takes e7 mate, and on bishop takes f6, bishop to g6 is mate. Very nice how these pieces are all coordinating beautifully. Okay, so both of those are wrong responses. F takes e5 though is good. So after f takes e5, rook to f1 is the only good move here for white, and now black's best is e4. And now white, I think the best move here is rook takes f3. So e takes f3, knight check, and this leads to a draw. So black can respond, let's say, three ways. He could play king to d8, king to f8, so it'll all come to the same thing. So if king to d8, so we'll go through the whole tour here. So let's say king to d8. Okay. Oh no, sorry. King to d8 is just bad because the knight takes a8. So never mind that one. So king to f8. Let me get rid of this. Yeah. So king f8 is okay, and also king to d7 is okay. But yeah, king to d8, knight takes a8. White's happy. All right. So king f8, knight e6 check, king e8, knight c7. Let's say black tries to go the other way this time. King d7. Well, now we take the rook. Rook takes, and now bishop to f5 check. And black is just out of good squares here. So if he goes to d8, then rook to g8, and thank you very much for the rook. And white has no problems with the f-pawn because the bishop just comes back to d3 or to h3. And everything's covered. Okay, so that's if king to d8. If king to c7, of course, we just take on e7, and that should be winning as well. So king e8, bishop to g6 check. Now, if king f8, that's only going to lead to trouble. Rook f7 check. And if the king goes to g8, we take the bishop on e7. If the king goes back to e8, then white can decide whether to just repeat or to start taking things. So king f8 is pretty senseless as well. So that leaves only king to d7, because king d8, rook g8 check. So king d7, bishop f5, and we have a little perpetual here. All right, so that was the game. As I said, it was just a 5-minute game, but it was just so much fun, and since it was in this same system that we've been looking at the last couple of weeks, I thought I would share this with you guys as a bonus video. So next week, we'll be back with another Najdorf and the conclusion of the Najdorf, looking at the move 10 g4. So from here, g4 is what we'll see next time. All right, have a good week. Hope you enjoyed this. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.